a night of all our years we wanted the world to see, the night of July 4th. With pinwheels and rockets like you, America, we, the free people of the Philippines, began our first evening of independence. We had shouted all day in celebration of our young nation, this child of democracy. And now there were tears, too, at his coming. He was sanctified by prayers. We danced the night away, a never-to-be-forgotten revelry of the free. A night of rejoicing and shadowed beauty, hiding for a few hours the ruins of our shattered capital, the unhealed wounds of our Manila, her desolation, her poverty. I was cited today for war service. I am Manuel Avellino, an unimportant man, but I was proud. Proud beyond a soldier's pride to receive the same decoration as Thomas Briggs, Tom Briggs of Ohio, my first school teacher. I know that liberty-loving peoples all over the world take hope from us, but they must go behind all the headlines fully to understand. They must know this gentle and learned man Briggs and the America he taught us in the beginning. I decorated him myself 40 years ago with the ripest papaya fruit I could find. Tom Briggs was 23, and I, Manuel Avellino, was 9. He chased me, but I got away that once. I disapproved his settling in our village on the island of Negros. I considered myself a guerrilla fighter like my father, who had battled the Americans with Aguinaldo. My father smoldered still with suspicion and hatred. But Tom Briggs caught me in the end. He entrapped me with an idea. I am a Filipino, a proud assertion that I was his equal, a free individual worthy of his respect. He told me of a breed of men who fought in rags for liberty. Tom Briggs and 900 like him had come 8,000 miles from a healthful homeland to a steaming country brimming with mysterious diseases. For small pay, he had come in the prime of his youth to teach us 2 times 2. When I grew older, I wondered why he stayed. Very simple, he said. You wanted what I had to give. You craved to know, boy and girl, and mother and father and aunts and uncles, and all the elders. Knowledge you craved more than food, more than riches, more perhaps than liberty. So Tom Briggs stayed because we believed in him. This was a wonderful turn of fate, the transplantation to the Philippines of the most American unit of learning, the one-room schoolhouse. When America was young, little schools like ours unified her scattered people. And so it worked with us, when English speech began to bridge the gap between 6 languages and 80 dialects. Now, your school teachers weren't the United States government out here, but they seemed so to us because they were forever explaining America. And when your doctors came to free us of plague, we trusted them because our teachers vouched for them. And because it seemed to us that the teacher's post was great in dignity and honor, it was first among our aspirations. The rise and recognition of the Filipino in education through American faith and training confirmed the promise that our country should be administered by our own people. The evolution of the schools themselves must hasten through 40 years in this brief story. Years' growth are depicted here in seconds as if by magic. In memory, this swift expansion seems true. Our pace was magical. It was the Filipino teacher, in partnership with his teacher, the American, who prepared us for the responsibility that came with our Home Rule Commonwealth in 1935. It was he who made us ready to legislate and administer. And our flags flew together, casting before them the shadow of closer partnership, to be sealed in blood at Bataan. How well educated then is the Filipino? The scale is fantastically wide. Nowhere on earth is standing so dependent on what one knows. The sugar worker can spell out the simplest words of English. This rice farmer has had a half-term in a one-room school. This cab driver can read just well enough the street signs and addresses. This mayor's clerk has had a year of high school. This rural magistrate a year of college. The airline stewardess is a trained nurse. The engineer is a Bachelor of Science. This lawyer an AB and an LLB. This physician earned her MD at the University of Michigan. How Americanized? Only our old men recall the time when we didn't take American civil liberties for granted. It was years ago when their astonished eyes first saw an American law violator brought to trial before a Filipino judge, prosecuted by a Filipino lawyer, under statutes that applied to us all. When we accepted it as everyday fact, you had captured the imagination of millions. Equal and exact justice to all men, all Filipinos? Hard to believe. Took time to believe. How American? Your literature is ours. Your books, your armchair favorites, your classics, your magazines, comics and films. We share your athletic enthusiasm, though Spanish graces linger in our calisthenics, paced always to stately music. Your school sports, basketball and track and softball, we adopted wholesale long ago. Your boys and girls of the sandlots would never find us napping on third. After dark, despite what you see here, señoras and señores, we are not your slavish mimics. The Alcamfor. It came from Spain and is still our favorite dance. Ask me again, how American? American enough to fight on after Bataan, after the Philippines were blacked out on all the maps, after the Japs held all our strong points. Tom Briggs, now a senior professor at Silliman University, knew we would. For Tom Briggs had helped build Silliman through 41 years, from its founding as the first private school under the American flag in the Philippines. He had studied us closely enough from that day in 1901 when Silliman was a one-room Presbyterian mission school on the beach, to this day, 4 weeks after Bataan, when its 2,000 students and its 100 professors must march away into the jungles or surrender. Surrender meant probable safety. Being caught in hiding, oh, let us say death at best. And yet none hesitated. Divided into family groups for better concealment, like Tom Briggs' party, all gave themselves into our keeping. Here they were then, our couriers reported, a day's journey from home in the free hills. For how long? Had the war reached their university? The war was very young. I was led to their refuge 6 weeks later by the boy Dandito. Brave, carefree Dandito, scout and messenger. He went everywhere. all seemed so serene. Conchita and Mary Kramer were grinding corn. Mary's husband, Professor Kramer, and Jose were preparing for heavy weather. Their father, Tom Briggs, my indestructible teacher, was flirting with the notion of opening a school. Mary's sister, Joan Briggs, was thinking about getting out a Free Hills news bulletin when she got news. Chief Cook Josefa was delighted with Dandito's gifts, most cleverly fetched from an occupied village. And here was Dr. Carmen Romero, self-appointed Free Hills health officer, treating Janet Kramer's sprained arm. A quiet day, too, for Pedro and Carlos, the sentinels. It all seemed so serene, so remote that you wouldn't have believed the surrounding jungles were filling with softly creeping little men, whispering teams of machine gunners. It all seemed so serene that I hated to tell how near I had seen the hobbed shoe tracks of Jap patrols and the ashes of campfires. Hated to show them how hard was tomorrow's trail, to warn that by tomorrow at the latest, the story of this camp would end in a wispy column of smoke. That was the first camp, peaceful Camp Donald, burning. So we found new trails or went headlong without trails. And then we listened. We didn't see the Jap, but we heard him through a loudspeaker talking English.
We know you are there, Professor Briggs. We have all your names. Come to us, Professor Briggs. No hard sentence.
We knew the Jap couldn't see us, but we heard him very clearly. After that, Camp Mickey Mouse burned, and then Camp Clarabelle Cow. But Camp Pluto didn't burn. 3 camps had burned in our year, but Camp Pluto was a going concern. Pluto suggests a funny dog to you, not so to us, the Filipinos. Reconstructed from memory, it seems a small symbol of a strange splendor. Here was Joan Briggs, very much like hundreds of American girls, a girl of 20. After a year of desperate living, she was tapping out the story of democracy as it poured from a radio that had cost the lives of 2 Filipino boys who had sailed it through Jap minefields. Printing it on presses miraculously smuggled 50 miles. Here was Joan, publishing daily the promises of democracy and sending them spiraling over the island to be read and copied and sent on again. This was Joan. And there were hundreds of Joans and Juanitas, a network of Conchitas and Raquels, of Ramons and Juans at press and radio. Here was Tom Briggs, serving underground education just as confidently as if any one of his teachers and pupils couldn't cause his torture, or his death, or the deaths of all his loved ones, with a word to the invader down on the coast. Here were Carmen Romero and Isabel Mora and Mary Kramer, operating an almost island-wide health service with materials supplied at heaven knows what cost. All over the world, the Philippines were blacked out on the maps, conquered. But we knew this was not so. Not an island was conquered. Our islands were ripening for MacArthur's men. And they were coming, MacArthur's men. These galloping Filipinos carried a token from them. An American magazine, published only recently, must have been landed by submarine with one of you. The date on each page, December 1942, proved to us that somewhere, somehow, some of you had come back. A price, we all know, was paid for all this. We shall never forget that you paid it with us. A price, a great price, paid by someone called Pedro, or Fernando, or Jose, or Juan, some Manuel, or our own Dandito. But then something grows from all the graves of all our Danditos. As our flag flew on July 4th, I remembered our great Commonwealth President, Manuel Quezon, so near death, so valiant at Corregidor. And though we knew he could not live to see this day, we remembered too Quezon's words about another banner. Whenever this flag comes down, you will find in its folds the grateful hearts of 18 million Filipinos. This is not the end, but the beginning of the story. If 36 of your greatest states were ruins and waste, your post-war estate might be likened to ours. Before Manila can shimmer in the sun again, conserve our commerce, contain our federal government, manufacture our goods, it must all be rebuilt. And all the dormant potential riches of the Philippines must be made to flow again before this can occur. America developed much of this wealth. We shall beseech her aid in saving it. We must deal too with legitimate ambitions of agrarian workers who by a decadent system virtually are bonded to the land. The nearest American term you can apply to them is tenant farmers, an expression we did not invent. A vast section of these people were the backbone of our resistance. They learned a heady power in wartime solidarity and have militant ideas of wealth distribution, radical methods of effecting them. This is a first order of business in the cabinet of President Rojas, turning these desires into constitutional paths, into channels of democracy, so our independence is not all exaltation. Up here on the great wall of our ancient capital, I see clearly the coming years of striving. But there is something among these ruins, Tom Briggs, that shall mend them. Something of you who taught, you are a Filipino. You have a right to dignity and freedom, an uncommon thing for you to say in those days, uncommon in these days. Your flag is gone, but its folds still hold our 18 million grateful hearts.